Okay. Welcome. Here we go. Welcome, everybody. This is our next episode of Teacher Talk, which is where between two teachers put somebody between us and we talk to them. And this week, we're speaking to our friend Darlene Rios Drapkin. And Darlene is here representing the census, the U.S. Census, Census 2020. And this week, we're going to have Darlene explain all about the census and particularly how it connects to our incredible needs in education. So Darlene, take it away.
Madeline and Consuelo.
Yes.
And the importance of the census in 2020. I really appreciate the opportunity, especially as a Richmonder myself. And my husband is actually Ken Lindgren. He teaches in the special ed at Vista School. So schools are very important to all of us, no doubt about it. So let's talk about Census 2020. I'm going to start off by talking, actually I'm going to skip around a little bit to why the census is important. It's in our Constitution. It is central to our democracy. But actually the census goes all the way back, not just from 1790 when the first census was conducted. It goes back to Joseph and Mary when they were on their way to give birth to Jesus. They were actually traveling 90 miles to Bethlehem, their civic responsibility, which was the census. So it has more importance than anything is that it goes all the way back to biblical times. So it is important. It's in the Constitution. Why is census data important? It pretty much impacts all segments of our life. All of the funding that organizations and federal agencies and local county local agencies procure is done with census data. So census data really matters, including whether a bus stop is going to go on a corner, any sort of planning. Housing, as we well know, is in shortage these days. Daycares, whether a grocery store will decide to come into your neighborhood, a private developer will look at census data to determine whether they want to place that grocery store into the neighborhood. But especially if
now, let me stop you for a minute. I think that's something that people don't think about because they think the census is only looked at by government officials, right? From one government agency or another. And that's not true, right? It's looked at by business.
Wow. Wow.
It's looked at by for all kinds of that are made. So yes, it's extremely important because
Wow.
it's those numbers, those stats that are going to impact, and all decisions are made based on that data.
Scientific research. Wow. Okay.
Everything.
Yeah.
You know, some of the natural disasters we've had. So why does the census matter? It's about power and representation. Also, make sure that we are elected officials. It decides not only the House of Representatives, but it also decides even like city councils, school boards. It pretty much decides a lot of things based on what numbers exist in each one of our neighborhoods. Then it's about the money. $675 billion is distributed annually based on census data, and it's all based on population. So if a neighborhood doesn't show the numbers, they're going to get cutbacks in funding. Hone down that number of $675 billion. If it's been said that for every person that we don't count here locally, we lose about $2,000 per person for each person that is not counted in the census. So it's all about justice because we need fair representation, and we certainly we need the resources.
Excellent.
Now, this has been a big issue because we know that there was talk about whether the census data is safe and secure. And of course, there had been an issue about putting the question about the citizenship on the census. It is not on the census. It is only 9 questions, and the answers that people give in the census are confidential. They're only reported in statistical format. So a census form is not sent to a person's name. It's sent to an address. And all we really want to know is how many people are living in that household. Now, it will ask the person's name and their date of birth, because we need to have some identifying factor. But other than that, that is the only personal information that is asked, is your name and your date of birth. It's not asking social security numbers. It's not asking how much you weigh, which sometimes can be very personal information for people. It's not asking a lot of info. It only really wants to know whether you own or you rent your home. And I'm so glad that it's asking that information, because we know that we're going to need a lot more housing in the next 10 years. It is asking about your gender. And I'll show you real quickly some of the other questions. We do not share the answers on the census are not shared with ICE, with Homeland Security, with parole officer, any sort of agency. It is all strictly for statistical purposes. Census employees are sworn to a lifetime to protect respondent information, and there are stiff penalties if those rules are ever broken. So we've already talked about the census. It's safe, it's important, very easy this time to respond. This will be the first census in 2020 that people can respond from the comfort of their cell phone or on the internet, or they can call in their information, or they can still respond the traditional way, which most people might remember, which was filling out a paper form. It is also available in 13 languages. So we're really trying to make sure that everybody's comfort level of the language that they feel most comfortable in, their native language, is covered. There's even visual guides up to 59 languages. So it's easy, important, and safe. That is really the message of the census. So who are the hard to count? And all of you will be able to relate to this. People who are moving around, couch surfing, racial and ethnic minorities, non-English speaking, low income, people experiencing homelessness, undocumented immigrants. Point in our lives, feeling that distrust of government, people with mental or physical disabilities, people who do not live in traditional housing. And then there's, the LGBTQ senior citizens. But an important group is young children. In the last census, we undercounted our children by, it's known, up to 7%, and some of our children in Latino communities and African American communities, up to 7%. People maybe have completed the census and forgotten to have counted their children. And certainly they matter, because especially we realize that when people went to go register their children for school, we didn't have enough schools to cover all of the children. Yep. So remember, we only do the census every 10 years. And if we don't count that little baby that was born by April 1st, which was the official census day, we're missing $2,000 per year in funding for our children. And of course, children become difficult to count because they may be in complex households. Maybe they're living with mommy, maybe they're living with daddy part of the time, maybe they're living with grandma or in foster care, and we forget to count them. And all of us will agree that our teachers matter and we need to count them. So I'm shifting here to the census, the strategy. Everybody by now, every household in the United States will have received an invitation to receive the census online. So this was back in March when we first started a shelter in place. Everybody received 2 letters to ask them to respond. Then for those who respond, they got reminder postcards, a reminder letter, and a paper questionnaire. And by now, everybody should have received up to 5 or 6 invitations to respond. And so I can go now and talk about how the response is looking to date. We can see here that the US response rate is at 59.1 as of yesterday. Now here are the figures for us specifically. We said USA 59.1, California is at 60.2. Contra Costa County overall is the 3rd top responding county in the nation. But then we get to West County, you guys, and that's where we need to look close. Look at Richmond, San Pablo, and even Richmond's looking kind of good, 61.7. El Cerrito, Hercules, Pinole. But now let's look at some of our neighborhoods, some of these census tracts that the Iron Triangle, and some of you teach in some of these areas or may live in them. You can see that we've got some work to do. These are our true count census tracts that need a little bit of nudging. And we had been expecting during this period that we would be hand-holding folks through this. But of course, COVID came. So now we're having to readjust our strategy. We're going to reach these hard to count communities. But you see the figures across the board, right? So you get a sense. I can make this available. You guys will have this so you guys can look at it closely. Every day we're monitoring what is the response and how we can make a difference in them. Where are we now? Moving around in the presentation. I don't know if we want to make sure this is like the census form. It's very simple. It's 9 questions. And we're always reminding people not to forget the newborn precious or the auntie and uncle living in the converted garage. We know that we don't want to forget every person, because if we only count 3 or 4 people in our household, and we know that living much more bundled together, we need to make sure we count the number of people, even the children, non-relatives, people staying here temporarily.
Yeah, that's the big thing. Somebody staying temporarily, this is it. We count them, even though we don't know, they may be leaving next week, or we don't know when they're leaving because they're looking for a job.
Okay.
But they should be counted, right?
Madeline, correct. And even people who are living, yes, they should all be counted. And even, thankfully right now things have changed. I don't know where our homeless people experiencing homelessness,
Right.
they can even fill in the form and put in that they're at the corner of McBride and San Pablo, because at least then we got them counted and we'll figure it out. But thankfully right now we're working with group quarters and with the county to try to make sure that we count our homeless population. And we'd rather count people twice than not count them at all. And remember,
Right.
the identifying factor is going to be their name and their date of birth.
So they're being, even if they're being relocated, the homeless we have new housing situations for them because of COVID, right? As they're trying to move them into something more secure. But then they just count and say that that's where they're living, wherever that temporary housing is.
Yes, all the best plans have been having to be revisited, as you can imagine, but we're working real closely with all of the facilities and everything to make sure that we count everybody. Question that gets asked a lot, if you look at starting with number 8, is this person of Hispanic, Latino, or Spanish origin?
Yeah.
And so that question is always, because we have such a large Latino population in this country. But then it goes on to ask the person's race, which asks white, black, American Indian, or Asian. That does get a little bit confusing for some people because it is a little bit redundant, I'm going to have to say. So the nice thing about the census is it is letting you self-identify, so that in that box that some other race, you can write in how you identify.
Right.
So that is really one of the, so I'm not going in depth into this. If anyone, some of you who are working with community want some more specific workshops on answering the census, we can go into that, but for the sakes of this presentation, we're going to go through it quickly. I mentioned that there's phone lines in 13 languages. These are the toll-free numbers people can call to complete their census. They want to do it by phone. And then there's actually video guides in 13 languages that help guide people. They're 11 minutes, 13 minutes in 13 languages online that you can easily find under the census.gov to guide people through completing the census. And it's an intro to the census, why it's easy, important, and safe, and how to complete the census. Stats in schools. Wow, we've got such amazing, cool programs that people can use. You go to census.gov/schools, and there's actually some new activities that have been added to this website to help with teaching from home. Okay, so you go up to, if you go to this website and 2020 census, you'll see, you can navigate through it and find all kinds of activities from pre-K, starting all the way up through high school, even for ESL teachers, for them to have lessons that you can teach from home or on your online teaching to teach about the census and make it engaging and interesting. This is my favorite, and I don't think I can play it right now because we're still getting the, but this song exists, counts. It's a sing-along in both English and Spanish, because everyone counts in the US of A. Everyone counts in their own special way. And because I'm not a good singer, I'm keeping my day job. But it's a really cool video and song that is online that you can share and have fun with. So thankfully, there's a lot of people working on the census. I am with the U.S. Census. It's responsible for the count. I am with the partnership staff. But thankfully, the state has been investing all kinds of funding, and there's been grants given to a lot of organizations, United Way Bay Area. The counties have been working on the census, and you, who I'm speaking to today, are our trusted messengers that are helping us to work with populations and encouraging people to fill out the form. Here is my contact name, and I'm working real closely with Contra Costa County to make sure everybody's counted. Questions or comments?
That was great. There was a lot of information.
That was
I
good.
know, I speak really quickly, don't I?
But that's
Thank
why
you.
we can stop it and rewind if somebody wants to, hear it again.
Yeah, yeah. What I like the breakdown of, you could even get down to the neighborhoods. I think that's very useful for people. And especially, like, suppose, I say, well, how can I help? And how can I help in my neighborhood?
Right. Go back to the slide before this, where we actually have the map, right? There it is.
This one, yeah, this is really interesting, Madeline, because actually here we're seeing the ones that are the orange, the dark orange,
Mhm.
and red. Those are the census tracts that are right now the lowest response, that we need to give them
Wow.
to help them
Right.
respond.
Right.
Wow.
And
As I was
this one
looking,
actually,
El
you see
Cerrito,
the one census tract is the iron triangle. You actually, it's
That's
the shape of a triangle.
that's red, right? That one is
Yeah.
red. And then,
And North
some of
Richmond.
them are really almost done. I mean, there were the dark purple ones are El Cerrito, and they've responded very well, right?
El Cerrito has been responding. You can see they're at 75.8%.
75. Yeah. Of course.
Yeah.
And I also like that there's those little units for teachers, because distance learning, I'm sure they could put that in there, a little mini lesson on the census. And if you have
Right.
that, well, I think that's a good resource right there. Very useful.
It's a wonderful reason, and also for parents, because as our parents will all tell you, they are all teachers now, right?
Yeah.
There is no parent who's not also a teacher right in this time of COVID, and it gives the parents a chance to learn about it in a little different way, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's so important. You know what it makes me think of? Those Finding Your Roots programs, and they go back and they look at old census records, and that's how you go find out. So this is for all of future.
This is for the future.
This is for the future.
This is for the future, right?
Yes.
And this is when part of this is, I think people need to understand one of the social justice implications here is the folks who talk about a food desert, right? A food desert is somewhere where no one has built a Safeway or a large supermarket. The people who decide to build the Safeway or the supermarket, they pull up the census data to decide whether or not they're going to be able to make money there. So when you don't get yourself counted, right? If the iron triangle is undercounted, it's not going to be, this is just a numbers thing more than anything else. The people who make those decisions just run the numbers, and the numbers tell them, yes, there is a big population here, or no, there's nobody here, and it won't be a viable business opportunity.
That's a good point.
That's, I think, a really important thing for folks to know, that they really are hurting themselves in respect to what kind of a business community they're going to be able to support, right? Even from people who are just, it's not even, they're not going to move somewhere where they think they can't make money.
Yeah.
It's just that simple.
Yeah, for sure.
We've been really trying to make this effort of letting people know that they may not be able to vote, but they can be counted. And it's
Really important
because we want to demonstrate that the numbers exist of support. As the Latino community, they are working here, they're paying taxes.
Absolutely.
They deserve to be able to tap into these resources as funding that exists. And if our numbers are not community, it's going to impact all of the funding we receive. So the message I send a lot in Spanish is, aquí estamos y no nos vamos, nada que temer, mucho que ganar. We're here, we're not leaving, nothing to fear, more to gain from responding to the census. And it really takes that much time, effort, but they can be empowered by responding to the census and giving them some sort of a voice by responding to it.
Right. And the opposite is true too. If you're in hiding and you're not here, then what's going to happen is none of these opportunities are going to come. And the reason is that you're not pulling the trigger to bring the opportunities in, right? And that trigger is to raise your hand and say, yes, we're here. We're ready we need the opportunities, and we're ready to support the businesses and the other communities that want to join us. But we can't do that if we don't know you're there.
That's
So
right.
I think it's an incredibly important thing for all of our communities to understand. And there is no, all of the protections are built in. There is no downside to doing this, right? There's nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing that's going to happen. And one of the things we've talked earlier about people not trusting. Right? I was in a meeting last night where they talked about how many communities don't trust the government, and that's why they're not going to respond. But it becomes a circular a cycle that you don't get out of, because if you decide not to trust the government and tell them you're there and ask for the support, then they're never going to give it to you, and they're going to be able to say, well, we're not going to give it to you because there's nobody who lives there.
Yeah.
And here's what's interesting, Madeline. People may not trust the government, but they trust their teachers. I think teachers are one of the trusted messengers.
Right.
And teachers have that role, that important role that they can play in letting their students know, to let the parents know that, have you been counted for the census yet? It really does matter, and you're going to help with bringing in the funding that we need to serve you better as teachers. And you're
Exactly.
impacting funding 10 years from now for high school, for colleges, to make sure that we're making sure that we've planned correctly for the number of people that national system needs to serve.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Very good.
That's it.
So are there organizations, suppose I want to help and I don't know where to go, what to do, where do I go? Where do I start?
Well, gosh, there's, if you go online to the census, I mean, you can either work with me and, but there's also cococensus.org. Some of the organizations here locally that are working on the census is the Latina Center, GRIP, Spark Point, a lot of agencies here locally, the city of San Pablo, the city of Richmond. Thankfully, there are a lot of organizations that are working on the census, as I mentioned in this slide. So reach out and I'll put you in contact with how you can help. I've been talking a lot to the scouts, to the school outreach workers, and before this whole shelter in place, I had been going to a lot of chats with the community outreach workers. Some of the things that are coming up, you guys, that are really interesting is a caravan that the city of San Pablo is going to be holding on Censo de Mayo, which will be on May 30th, a Saturday. And we're going to be having like a 5 or 6 caravan cars driving through the city of Richmond and San Pablo, reminding people about the importance of the census. We've also been participating in some of the food banks, school distributions, to help give out information about the census and reminding some of the folks that those food banks are impacted also by census data.
Oh, yeah.
So,
maybe you could give them out with the diplomas at the graduations. If every family that has a graduate is going to, now it looks like there's going to be some version of a graduation, perhaps, if the county has just made this change, that perhaps we can do it. I mean, that would be a gathering. Anyway, just a thought.
That's a great idea, Madeline. If you give us an idea of those events, we've just got to make sure we plug into those events and provide some those.
Okay.
Those are all great ideas, and that's what we want. I really shout out to Leslie Ricker from the Bayside PTA. She's been real supportive. You know that the West Contra Costa Unified School District did adopt a resolution to support the census to its fullest. So we've been very pleased about that, and this opportunity to you and continue to talk about the importance of the census. Now, the other thing I guess I forgot to mention is that the census has been extended. It was supposed to have ended July 31st. It has been extended to October 31st, which is a mixed blessing because now we have more time, but we've got to maintain the momentum. and stretch out the dollars to be able to make an impact in getting our grantees to help out with reaching out to people. But that means that the non-response follow-up is going to have started to happen this week, where the traditional census taker that everybody kind of imagines was going to be going door to door to homes that had not completed the census. Now they're not scheduled to start up till August. So there is time for people to do it at home or on the phone or with the form that they received in the mail. But it's going to be, it takes all of us, it takes a village to let people know, please complete your census if you haven't done it already, because it really is important.
Absolutely.
Great.
So anything all of you guys can help. Let's make sure Richmond and San Pablo and all of our communities in West County are that we achieve a really great count that we can be proud of.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Well,
so
Darlene,
much.
thank you. This was incredibly informative, Darlene. We will put this up on Between Two Teachers, and we'll send the link to you. So if you want to share out the recording, because I think you gave a lot of great information. And if you want to send me a copy of the PowerPoint, I'll put that link into with the link in the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I just want to make myself, I'm available anytime to insert myself into any sort of webinar. For example, some of the webinars that I did this week is even reaching out to senior providers, because also our senior as well, another undercounted, but I'm willing to come into classrooms Zoom wise and talk about it. I'm sure you guys can all do really good job with your stats and schools activities. Look at them closely, but anytime you want any additional sort of support, that's what the census is to support all of your efforts.
Wow, that's great.
That's perfect.
Thank you
Thank you so much.
Oh.
Thank you, Madeline and Consuelo, for having me on. Anytime, I'm ready to come back and hang with you guys.
Okay, you would.
Okay. All right.
Sure.
Well, we want to know. We want to see them all turn dark blue, so that we
Yes.
right. We want to follow
that
the
is our
colors
goal.
on that map.
That's our goal. That's our goal.
That's our goal.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank
Okay.
you. Okay.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Okay.
Okay.